we're going to go over 3 high damage leveling builds. And these are starter builds that do insane amounts of damage with fast clear times. And we'll go over 3 different builds using all 3 elements. That way you have a diverse range of what you want to pick and what playstyle you want to choose. But let's just jump right into it. What's up, World Stripper? Back in the video, and today we're checking out all things Diablo 4. Okay, so first up, let's talk about a few things that I think that people aren't really discussing. And a lot of build videos that I've seen recently are all like level 50 or level 100 or even like level 70. No one's really discussing or talking about the early game levels and what to do at the start. And so things like even like the firewall build, you really won't be able to establish that until level 15. And so right off the bat, I am going to recommend, this is just kind of like a base level thing, for levels 1 through 14 or 15, I would recommend an ice or even a lightning build. Now this is just for basic chain lightning, but there are essentially 2 routes that you can go here. You could go with arc lash or spark. At the beginning, I actually do prefer to go spark, and the reason being is arc lash is a lot of melee stuff, and if you want to play in melee range as a sorcerer, that's perfectly fine. But for now, we're going to go with spark. So we'll go 1 into spark and then immediately get its first trait. We'll then head over and try to get chain lightning as fast as possible, because while you're leveling, this ability is absolutely insane for the first 15 level. Now you could go into the first trait with chain lightning, but you also could go into what spark has. I do think for crit purposes, I'm going to go into glinting spark first, then I'll come back and get the chain lightning abilities. We'll obviously get that first passive after chain lightning, and then we'll head into greater chain lightning. Because as of right now, crackling energy really isn't an optimal build to play as until you can get further in the tree. From here we have a few options. We could go into ice armor or even flame shield, but I would go into ice armor for the mana regeneration. So I would immediately get those 2 perks, the ice armor and then the first perk for the mana regen. I'll probably have to go over and grab teleport, although sometimes in these early levels you'll likely get something that has teleport on it, at least from what I noticed, but for now we're going to go ahead and grab that point. Now we'll head back to chain lightning. We'll basically be funneling our points until we can get to the next tab. Once we're at 3 of 5, we should be at the next tab here, and we should be around level 12. We're still going to grab Hydra because it's just like a turret that doesn't have any HP, and it's just nice to have, especially at the beginning. So we'll grab that Hydra, and then we'll also grab its first perk. You also could instead grab Align the Elements depending on when you're fighting the elites. However, now you should be level 15, and now you can grab Align the Elements, or we can restart our builds from this point. Because after this point, these builds really do open up. So now we're going to go into the real builds. This was again level 1 to 15. Now we're going to go into the real builds that are actually in the beginning of the game. Now first up, let's just jump into our ice build. So I'm going to go ahead and refund everything. Okay, so now that we've refunded the spec, we're going to go ahead into Frostbolt. Frostbolt's a nice ability, provides good chilling effects, provides good frozen effects. Obviously, we're going to go into the first talent here. This build is all centered around making enemies vulnerable. Now, the other talent here doesn't really provide a good amount of mana regeneration. Did a bunch of testing there, it just doesn't. But in any case, we'll move down into here. And we already do have an item contribution here, but don't worry about that. We're going to go into it anyways, because Ice Shards, again, this is another really good ability. It kind of reminds me of Bone Spears on Necromancer, but doesn't have the same AoE stuff. But it kind of does with this Ricochet talent here, which allows you to kind of bounce off. Or also, another thing with this talent here that really helps us, I'll showcase in a minute. Now, again, we want to go with the vulnerability, because this is going to provide huge amounts of upside when we fight Java or other world bosses or other single target enemies, and the barrier one is just not that good. We're also going to go with our ice armor here, and I had 1 item contribution, but again, don't worry about that because we're only going to put 1 point into there for right now. And we want the mana regeneration. It's pretty good. Moving on, we actually do want to take Frost Nova. So we're gonna slap Frost Nova on, and we're gonna take the talents all the way down. We're gonna take the 1 talent here, and then we're gonna take the vulnerable talent as well. We want to upside the amount of vulnerability we're applying to an enemy. This provides a nice little AoE. You'll see it provides a nice little AoE attack where all the enemies become vulnerable, and it is very good for damage. Now we will take our head here, Hydra. It's just really good. Provides great single target damage. You only need the 1 point in there for now, and we're going to go ahead and take the extra healthy head as well. Now moving on, we do want to take Align the Elements. Probably want to get this as quick as possible, especially if you're doing on World Tier 2. It's just kind of an ability that you really need, especially on Sorcerer. Provides that great damage reduction, and it's pretty much taken with every spec. Now as always, I like to go into Glass Cannon. Whenever you want to do it, it's however you want to do. But this provides damage across all of your abilities. So even though like you're providing like 10% damage increases when you apply into a sort of ability or talent here, it's just much better, in my opinion, to take the Glass Cannon because you're providing that damage increase across the board. Now all I did here was I slapped Teleport on. Again, I have a contribution to it. I recommend trying to get an item that can contribute to this. Otherwise, you just either remove 1 out of Glass Cannon or take 1 out of, one of your main abilities here. You'll see it kind of all plays in later, and it'll be just fine. Okay, so last up, we're going to slap the rest of our 3 abilities into this. Now again, you can do this whenever, so this probably will only be 4 of 5 for you. If you really wanted to, again, take 1 on a glass cannon, throw that into here. Although everything else is kind of a mandatory thing here. We're not taking anything in this section here. And just try to get those item contributions if you can. But that about does it for the spec. And you'll see the damage showcase. I'll have a few B-roll footages where you'll see I line up enemies. I get them kind of together, pile them up, smack down a nice little AoE. And then there's another ability here, the skill enhancement, or enchantment rather, which I always forget to bring up in videos, but I brought it up at the very end. So what you're going to use for the skill enchantment is the ice shards. And the reason being is this ice shard right here automatically conjure and fly towards frozen enemies. So what ends up happening is when you gather enemies around in a circle and you get them in a pile up and you smack down that nice little AoE ability for Frost Nova, it will make all the enemies vulnerable, and then it instantly shoots out your frozen shards. It instantly shoots out frozen shards at them. But this will make for a fairly decent starter build. Now let's move on to the firewall build. This is actually super active. It's super fun to play. It does a lot of AoE damage. You're going to be putting down firewalls and things of that nature. And so let's just jump right into it. So first up, unfortunately, we have to take all 5 of our main kind of skill set here because we're actually going to skip this entire row here. So we'll go ahead and go into these. Now you can decide if you want. Now I know people in my last video didn't really like that I said that you can go either one and they kind of just wanted more of like a set thing. But if you're finding out that you're running out of mana or things of that nature, you can always switch these for a lot of cases, for a lot of specs, if you just are finding one thing more playable than the other. But I go this route because we're already going to have a lot of mana regeneration, so I don't think. But anyway, so in order for us to push over to here, we really don't want anything else here. And I know in one of my videos I did the little mana thing, which I thought this was much more than just 3 mana each. I thought there was like, you know, a smaller mana pool than 100. In any case, so we're going to have to go into all 5 into here, or at least 4 to push into the next row here. And then once we get into here, we're going to go ahead and we already have a teleport, which is nice. So we don't have to waste a point there for now, but we do want to get Ice Shield because Ice Shield is going to help a ton with our mana regeneration. And so I only go into the 1 spec here. Now, we also want to grab our Flame Shield, and we don't really need to grab this one. Flame Shield doesn't last very long as far as kind of the push. And so after this point, because we don't really have anything else to put points into, we're going to come back into here and put another point into our Firebolt. Again, this is helping with leveling as you go, and so you can kind of see how the points work out as you level. Now next up, we will go into 1 into Glass Cannon. And then once we get here, we're going to go ahead and slap my abilities down here. And again, this is the 1 item contribution technically, but you can swap out one of the points, especially for Glass Cannon. Fire Shield on here as well. Okay, on to the next part. Now we'll come into here and we will grab a Hydra. Now, I like to just do 1 for now, and I'll show you why that is. We're also going to grab into the Align the Elements, so I would grab this pretty early on if you can, maybe right after you get 1 into Hydra. We're also going to put 1 into the Healthy Head here. And then after this point, we'll go ahead and, because we can't get into too far, now moving on from this point, you have a few options here. What I like to do is, because there isn't a lot of damage increase with the Hydra, as you see here, it's very small numbers, and unless you have the 2 heads that you can make with the legendary, I would recommend taking these 2 points that you're going to put in here and putting them in a Glass Cannon, because it's going to make all damage across your character a lot more. You will notice the increased damage right away. It is pretty stark, whereas the damage output does feel very hectic. Now, while you're building, I will mention that while you're building this, you might want to use a lightning build until around level 15, as this is when you'll be able to finally get, maybe 16, if you don't have an item contribution, is when you'll be able to get Firewall. Now, Firewall already has an item contribution in it, but we're going to go ahead and put another point in it anyways. And then we're going to go ahead and take our Enhanced Burning Wall, and we'll take the mana regeneration here. This does leave you with usually 2 points left, or 1 point left rather, and so I would just put that in Firewall, and you'll probably be out of 2 here, which that will be your main ability. At least my move is on my right click, whereas my main ability is on my left click. Now, there isn't really any other way to get points here, so you're probably only going to have 2 of 3 unless you have the ending ability, or I think you can get the ending amulet that gives you the +1 to all mastery skills, which is right here. So you should have this when you get to the end of the game. You should have 3 here. You should have 1 in Firewall already, but you'll only be able to get 2 if you don't have the item, or if you have to replace the item finally. But this should be the primary build. Again, if you really wanted to, or if you had the legendary, you could swap out these 2 points or not take glass cannon at all, and then put the rest of the points in here. Although I still would recommend taking glass cannon because we already have a ton of mitigation here. And as you see, none of the item contributions mattered. I still had to put 1 on ice armor to get that. And so everything else is fair and fine. So I didn't need to take off anything to like I did last time. But that does about cover it for the early game builds. I am probably also going to have a video out tomorrow, depending on how far on level I get. And I will have a build that further discloses exactly what I am planning. But if you enjoyed it, like and subscribe. And until the next one, deuce.